and welcome
to the BS podcast.
B for Belle
S for Shaz. This is just two girls talking BS
and calling BS out
through our eyes.
Before we start, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which this podcast is recorded, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay our respects to the elders past, present, and emerging, and any First Nations people listening to this episode.
All right, folks, guess who's back? Back again.
Shady's back. Well,
Tell a friend. And well, in this case, Shady is actually back, but I'm referring to Belle and Shaz back for round two.
Round two.
But before we dive in, we wanted to give a huge shout out to all our amazing supporters.
A big thank you
Yeah.
to all of you.
Thank you for the love, the sweet texts, the DMs, the public comments. We're really feeling the love.
Yes. Well, when Shaz and I put the first episode out, we enjoyed the process and we had fun with our live audience. But to have so many of you actually listen to it and go out of your way to say nice things about it to us, we're so appreciative and we're excited to continue on this journey.
Absolutely. And hey, even my mum's jumped on the bandwagon. When I sent her a link to our podcast, she said, good, which is, as anyone knows, the highest form of compliment that an Asian mother could give you.
Yes.
Just below cutting you a bowl of fruit. So like, my mum's happy. So we've got to continue, Belle.
Exactly. If it pleases your mom.
Yes. So here we are, back in the hot seat. So with the one and only Belle, are you ready to jump into our biggest story?
Yes, absolutely. And actually, before we go to the biggest story segment of this episode, we want to acknowledge really one of the biggest stories at the moment that we can't take our eyes off. A significant humanitarian crisis that is going on the other side of the world. In Gaza, the conflict and ongoing invasion by the Israeli Defense Force has resulted in the death of more than 35,000 people. That's men, women, and children.
Yeah, it's truly horrific. And it's really important to mention that this goes beyond politics. What's happening here is about humanity. It's the scale and the magnitude of not just the death, but the famine, the health conditions. It's completely unfathomable. This is a humanitarian crisis, as you mentioned, Belle, and it's something that should not continue. Belle and I wanted to express our solidarity and support to those who are all affected by this. So each episode, we've promised to bring you the biggest story of the month. And today, we're going to break down the budget. And before you roll your eyes and say, oh my God, what budget? Is it our household budget? No. It is the Australian federal budget, to be precise. The Treasurer delivered the budget in May. The opposition responded. So it's only fair that Belle and I get a chance to respond.
Share our peace of mind.
Exactly. So Belle, when I say budget, what comes into your mind?
Well, it has been burnt into my brain. When it comes to the federal budget, the image of a man in suit, the Treasurer of Australia, standing up with a thick deck of papers, reading out and saying Mr. Speakers 20,000 times, and with the rest of them, say hear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I present the Appropriation Bill number 1, 2024-25 and the explanatory.
And I call the Treasurer.
Thank you, Speaker. I move that the bill be now read a second time. And on this, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, for those of you who have never heard it before.
That's right. It is such a ritual, almost cult-like, and it warms my little budget nerdy heart.
So for many of you going, what is the budget? The budget is the Australian government's plan for collecting and spending money. The money is mainly collected through taxes and is used to pay for federal government services, and responsibilities such as welfare and defence. Think of it as how you might plan for a grocery trip, except in this case, the money is pooled from all Australians and you're trying to buy items that cater for the needs of everyone. So
it's exactly like managing a household of 5 people, but in this case for 25 million people.
Absolutely. And there's always questions of, should you buy the milk and the cereal, or should you spend that money on bread and toilet paper? To help answer that question, the budget is actually a collection of financial documents that, number one, explain the government's assessment of the national economy. Number two, explain the government priorities for the upcoming year. Number three, understand how much money the government plans to collect and who from. And finally, how the government actually looks to spend this money.
That's right. And people listening might think, okay, that sounds boring. Not for Shaz and I, but you might think so. What does it have to do with me and why should I care, right? As someone who's new to the country, that is myself, the first time when I properly engaged with the budget was during my student representative days when I was the national president of the student council that represent international students. And I had to follow the budget announcements to know what changes they're making to policies that relate to international education or the labor policies that will affect students so that I can formulate a response in my organization's press release.
That's so interesting, but also such a powerful perspective. How did you find listening to the Australian budget for the first time?
Well, I didn't really know what to expect. I was wrapped up in my blanket with my bunny at the time at home. That was during COVID time in May. It was cold. It was that particular Tuesday evening at 7 p.m. Turn on ABC and just watch the live stream from the parliament.
Was it just you and
my rabbit at the time? That's our household budget. Well, the federal budget speech was a lot more theatrical than I expected. I absolutely loved it.
Of course you would.
Well, I had assumed it would be boring, like listening to a headmaster's speech at school where you're dozing off and these old people are just like talking really slowly. But no, this was very dramatic. It was a performance from the treasurer to the Australian public, and it was like a debate as well, where the government puts out a range of policy decisions up against the opposition's policy alternatives. So it really is like a reality show for politicians, the real housewives of Australian Parliament.
I love that. And for many Australians, the budget tends to be one of those topics where you kind of hear about it on the news. The winners, the losers, who gets the roses this time, who doesn't get a rose. But it's really important to look beyond the theatrics and think about what decisions are actually being made and how is this going to help shape the country's future. One way to do this is to actually listen to the budget. The other is to, follow up and look at some of the documents in the news articles coming out.
Yeah, or listen to this podcast.
Absolutely.
Where Shaz and I break down the budget the best way that we can that relate to ourselves and our community.
Absolutely. So the 2024 budget comes at an interesting time for everyone, and not just in Australia, but across the world. Many of the most pressing issue tends to be the cost of living. Everyone's heard that term, everyone feels that term. Many people are really struggling to make ends meet. The government plays a part in choosing where to spend this money and how to spend the money to help people. This can include subsidies and tax cuts such as energy bill relief.
Yes, but the government has to be careful with injecting money into the economy, right? Because of the inflationary pressures that we can all see, especially most acutely for people with mortgage. Just seeing the interest rate rising through the roof is also causing a lot of stress for people. And inflation in general terms is caused by increased demand, increased cost, and/or just people's expectations. And we know that consumer spending is a key demand pool that causes inflation. So when the government gives money back to the people, a portion of it will lead to discretionary spending and pushes inflation up further. So that's one of the considerations that the government has. And what the government does in terms of the budget is called fiscal policies, and they work in conjunction, well, hopefully they do, with what the Reserve Bank of Australia does, which is monetary policies, such as setting the interest rate.
Yeah, absolutely. And another key factor to consider is who is the government? Right now, in Australia's political landscape, we're dominated by two major parties, the Liberal Party and the Labor Party, who sometimes need to form a coalition with smaller parties to form government. In general, the Liberal Party tends to lean to more economic and social conservatism, whereas the Labour Party tends to adopt more progressive stances and traditionally has aligned with the working class interests. There's often common ground in which they agree, such as gun laws, for example, but they can also wildly disagree on others, such as climate change policy.
And can I just say thank God that they agree on the former?
Yes. Oh gosh, we've all seen what happens in the US. And so it's important to note that both major parties in Australia are relatively centrist compared to the US, for example. So the 2024 budget is a Labour budget, and it's our current Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and Treasurer Jim Chalmers' second budget. So Belle, can you tell me what's actually in the 2024 budget?
Well, I'll spare our audience from listening to me repeat the 2 hours budget speech.
You don't want the here?
Well, if all of you will do that for me, then I will. Mr. Speaker, or Miss Speaker.
Miss Speaker.
Make it feminist. Budget
Absolutely.
speech, but make it feminist.
Absolutely.
Well, I'll give you the headline. The title of this budget literally is Cost of Living Help and a Future Made in Australia. Self-explanatory. Like, there is no poetry in
There
this.
is no room for interpretation, is what you're saying.
That's right. So we'll get to the second pillar, which is Future Made in Australia, in a second. On the cost of living front, as you said, in this current context, the government has committed funding in energy bill relief that will hit all of our pockets sometime soon. Cheaper prescription medicine as part of the PBS scheme, income tax cuts for everyone, aged care reform, Commonwealth rent assistance, etc.
Yeah. And from like a woman's angle, the government's also taken up a few measures to support gender equality. That includes over $56 million over 4 years to improve access to sexual and reproductive healthcare, including GP training for menopause care and qualification in the insertion and removal of long-acting reversible contraceptives. Anyone who's got an IUD understands the pain, the trauma, and almost the fear of going to the GP to talk about sexual and reproductive health.
Yeah, and we're both really big advocates for health, medicine, and women's health in particular.
Absolutely. In terms of other things, there's also the first national strategy to drive government action to achieve gender equality. There's a national student ombudsman to investigate student complaints with the universities. And something that's really exciting for, that I think is quite exciting, is superannuation paid on government-funded paid parental leave for parents of babies born or adopted after July 1st, 2025. And this is really to reduce the impact of career breaks when people do take time off work and their income isn't going into superannuation. So this is,
When it comes to addressing the gender pay gap, because career breaks, disproportionately, caring responsibilities are still held by women in our society, and anything that supports parents at work will help women who work.
Absolutely. And finally, another point in this budget that I thought was interesting was also the payment of $5,000 for people to help meet the cost of leaving a violent relationship. And this goes back to our episode number 1 where we talked about domestic violence. And look, there are many advocates that say $5,000 is not enough to get that rent to, find a new place and take their family. But it is at least a step, I think, in the positive direction.
Yeah, and for people who are interested in the discussion, go back to episode 1. It is a nuanced discussion, and there are so many actions that is really needed to address this issue. This is an element of it. And the other centerpiece is, of course, the Future Made in Australia strategy. The government has made a big song and dance about it, and my read is that they are picking this as a key election platform ahead of the next election, either later this year or next year. The Prime Minister hasn't announced it yet, but it will be soon.
Yeah.
And this budget includes $21 billion over the next decade into the industry, with the aim of supporting Australia to become a renewable energy superpower. And these include renewable hydrogen, green metals, critical minerals processing, and clean energy supply chains like solar panels. While we absolutely are advocates for green energy climate actions.
Anything that involves science and using science to push that innovation forward. Love the Australian science for Australian needs. Really, it speaks to both our hearts.
And not just for Australian needs, the climate crisis is something that affects everyone on this earth. So yeah, we are absolutely advocates for that. But there is definitely split opinion from experts and economists about this particular strategy, because it is certainly a complicated one when government tries to incentivize industry. There are so many factors that go into it. And whether their plan will play out the way it was intended. So respected economists like Rose Ganong, who founded the Superpower Institute, was very happy about it. He probably actually played a part in advising this policy. But others whom I follow, like Rose Bridgerton, are more skeptical. So I suppose we'll have to watch and see on this one.
Watch and see, I like that. We'll have to come back to it. Another part where, look, I actually think Asian parents might be influencing this policy. On education, for example, this is quite an interesting space and lots of things are happening right now. So government's just wrapped up a once-in-a-decade reform agenda, which is the Universities Accord. This was a 12-month review led by Australia's higher education system. It was a panel of these eminent Australians, and it was really to devise recommendations and performance targets to improve the quality, the accessibility, affordability, and sustainability of Australian higher education. And
I think,
go, Belle.
I think, well, both of us have been quite involved in the higher education sector in Australia, and we can certainly say that there are a lot of areas that need work. So the Universities Accord probably come at the right time, even though when it comes to the details and the focus, etc., we can have a debate.
Absolutely. And look, I'm smiling because at least it feels like there's action in here, where it definitely used to feel like there's conversation, but where's the action? So I'm excited by the action. So what was in the budget? In short, there's about 1.1 billion that will be spent over the next 5 years on initiatives such as HECS relief, placement support for teachers, nurses, midwives, and social workers, and also better access to courses. The government's also set, and this is where I think Asian parents had an influence on this, set a tertiary attainment target of 80% of working age population getting a tertiary education by 2050.
Our parents are definitely in the forefront of that.
Absolutely. It was a headline that definitely caught my eyes. But to support these types of initiatives, there was also cuts. And this is where I think, Belle, I'm really interested to hear your perspective. There were cuts, including stopping the funding of scholarships for the cutting funding for scholarships under the Destination Australia's program. Belle, can you tell me a little bit more?
Yeah, so this is quite interesting. Actually, in this budget, there aren't a lot of cuts at all. This is one of the only ones, especially in education bill. So Destination Australia relates to where people from other countries come to Australia to study. So basically international students. There are also other types of students like asylum seekers and exchange students. But as you know, that international students issue is very close to my heart. I was one, and most of my friends are international students.
And you are an absolute advocate in this space. So your opinion is important, and that's why this is such an important space.
Thank you. And these cuts really align with the government's migration reform agenda. The strategy says that it is to get migration working for the nation, which makes sense for Australians. But when it comes to strategies like this, often it relates to an industry where there are no other people involved. But when it comes to migration and international education, what you're talking about are hundreds and thousands of young people. We are humans, we come from different countries. Most of the time, 99% of the time, we come from countries that are poorer than Australia. And seeing the strategy and reading the strategy from the perspective and the language that says, basically, let's try and see how we can squeeze the most out of these young people who come here with hopes and dreams from poorer countries to Australia, wanting a tertiary education so that we can have a better future, is quite offensive.
Yeah, absolutely. Australia has always been built on the backs of migrants. our science, our technology. It's like we take and take and take. And what we provide is this beautiful place called Australia. And then to see that taken away, the hopes and dreams, it's just completely unfair.
Yeah, absolutely. And in international education, a few key changes in this agenda include raising the bar for international students. So now you have to show that the proof of your savings have to be a lot higher. Reducing the years of post-study graduate visa. So after you finished your study here, they're reducing the number of years that you can stay here with work visa, which really, really impact your opportunities to get a real professional job.
And it's already hard enough to get that job, and to then reduce the duration in which you're actually able to apply for a job is just really squeezing, as you said.
Yeah, absolutely. And lowering the age limit from 50 to 35. Well, they've now recently reversed it for research students because they realize how 35 is just ridiculous.
35 is when you get started in research.
That's exactly right. And you have so many talented scientists and researchers that I think 35, this policy is also ageist, can I just say?
We have an aging population. 35, when people drop dead at 60, but that's not what's happening anymore. People live up to 80 to 90. With an aging population, the numbers have to change. And it's unfortunate and really unfair.
They're just making it harder and harder for people who wants to come here to study and work. And there's also recently talks, and it will come into effect next year, a cap on international student numbers. And what really upsets me is the whole conversation and the dialogue that have been driven by both the government, so the Prime Minister, and the opposition, Peter Dutton, around how protectionist Australia should be, because in the face of these international students and migrants that are coming to take advantage of us, when we know that that is not the case. And going back to the Future Made in Australia strategy, Australia needs the talent, and international students and skilled migrants are such important pipeline for Australia to achieve that target, for them to turn around and really attack students who are vulnerable, often don't have a voice in a public domain. And I would argue for political gains, because the election is coming up and they are using this as a point to get political scores. So I am passionate about this issue and I won't stop talking about it.
As you should. And one thing to mention as well, education is one of Australia's largest exports. So we want them to come in, we want them to spend their money, and then there is absolutely no protection, so it just feels a bit like
That's right.
taking advantage of international students.
100%. International education is worth 48 billion in Australia, and it is the largest service export industry in Victoria. And people are afraid of saying that out loud and celebrating it because of the political narrative.
Belle, I know you've written an incredibly powerful piece on this. I know you're too embarrassed to plug it yourself, but can I just ask, if our listeners want to learn more about the international student experience, and especially the idea of how the budget plays a role, where can they find this piece?
Thank you. Well, it is lovingly published by Missing Perspectives. They are an independent global feminist media, intersectional feminist media. So I want to thank them for publishing my piece, and also it's such a pleasure to contribute to media like that. So go to Missing Perspectives and type in Berlin.
Yeah, it was such a powerful piece. When I saw that, I went, oh my God, it's not just the numbers, but it's the stories behind it. It was incredible. Well done. So, we've chatted about the budget, we've talked about what are some of the highlights, what are some of the lowlights, the winners, the losers, we've given out our roses, but Belle, why should we actually care?
Well, I'm of the view, if our audience hasn't already gotten it from our passionate discussion, that in democracy, it is important for citizens and residents to hold our government to account. The budget being a key instrument to decision making, understanding what decisions have been made on issues that are integral to our lives is important.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And just how we carefully select items in our grocery cart It's our responsibility to stay informed and hold our government accountable. So ask those scary questions, advocate for policies that promote equality, safety, and well-being. And with that, let's move on to our next segment.
In this next section of our podcast, we'll shine a light on those who defy stereotypes and challenge the status quo. Sometimes they make our world a little or a whole lot better. So today, given the topic, I want to bring two economists to the table.
Breaking rules already.
Breaking stereotype. So the first one is Michelle Bullock. She is the first female governor of the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia. She's the current governor, and it is a very high profile and powerful position. It is typically, if you think about the bankers, especially at the Reserve Bank, boys' club.
Absolutely.
Michelle is the first woman to be in the position. She was appointed in 2023, very recent. And get this, she's a career RBAer. So since she was at university, I think she started doing an internship there. She's been there for decades.
Wow.
Incredible. The second economist is Danielle Wood. She is the chair of the Productivity Commission, also appointed in 2023. She was the CEO of Grattan Institute before that. Also the first woman in the role of the chair of the Productivity Commission. In economics, it is a very male-dominated domain. Until recently, as we see. So these are really amazing women that are pushing the boundaries, and no doubt they are opening the doors wider for other women in the field. And in my previous role, I worked with many talented women economists. So I want to give a shout out to them.
Absolutely. And I
Hope
think
you're listening.
Yeah, and I think it's really important. If you can't see it, you can't be it. So absolutely, thank you so much, Belle. And I think it's so important that in this time when we talk about cost of living, that you bring these two people who are doing such important work. Well, they say great minds think alike. So I also, all this talk of budget, all this talk of money and mullah, got me thinking, who was the world's first female millionaire?
Oh.
And I was like, all right, let's look this up. Who could it be? And when I found this story, I was like, this is an incredible story. So while I breaking stereotypes, I'd like to introduce you to Madam C.J. Walker, America's first self-made millionaire, as recorded by the Guinness World Book of Records. So you know it's legit when the Guinness World Book of Records certifies it, all right? You know it's legit. So
That's the bar.
it is absolutely the barbell. So Madam C.J. Walker has this amazing story. She was born to enslaved parents. She was orphaned at a very early age. She was 7, and she was a washerwoman for about 20 years. But she never let her adversity define her. She saw an opportunity to kind of create change. She'd always struggled with hair loss, and she kind of started developing and playing around with remedies, especially for Black women.
Which I was going to ask, is she African American?
She's an African American incredible entrepreneur. So she started noticing that she had a bit of hair loss. And so she kind of tried a few things and found out that there was a homemade remedy that she had created specifically for Black hair. And so this eventually kicked off her beauty empire. She actually invented the world's first hair straightening formula.
Wow.
And so she, with that, amassed a fortune that was unprecedented at that time. And the story really kind of showed me that with determination and with a little bit of science and innovation, that anything could truly be possible.
I love that. What an incredible story. From a representation point of view, we know that even to this day, different hair type and that are associated with different ethnicity is still so underrepresented. And when it comes to solutions to our needs and the needs of Black women, it's still rarer than
Absolutely.
So what an amazing story.
It was she did something for the community and for the community to take it and run with it and build that empire. What an inspiring story.
So inspiring. And she was rewarded for it.
Absolutely. So Madam C.J. Walker, you are my breaking stereotype.
Great.
In our next segment, which we're calling Bold or Silly, Belle and I are going to share 2 stories each from around the world that could either be bold
Or silly.
or
both.
Absolutely, or both. Either of us do not know what we've chosen and what we're bringing to the table. So, Belle,
All right.
dealer's choice. Would you like to go first, or
I'm happy to go first because I think mine is probably both and silly.
Ooh, I'm excited.
Okay, intrigued. I'm reluctant to talk about this person, but he will be in front of us quite a lot this year, especially. But hopefully not after this year. Donald Trump. I'm sorry, guys. We have to talk about this. Donald Trump is heading towards an election rematch with Joe Biden. Can I just say this is so depressing? In November, and this time he will do so as a convicted felon. At least he is convicted. He's the first former president in the US history to be criminally tried and convicted, found guilty on all 34 charges of falsifying business records in relation to a hush money payment to adult film actress Stormy Daniels.
If someone told me this was a plot of a movie, I would not believe them.
It would be too outrageous as a movie plot.
Yes.
Well, he has a few more criminal cases coming up, and this is in addition to a series of civil cases, including one that he lost last year, thank God, that found that he sexually assaulted E. Jean Carroll decades earlier, and this woman has been through the ringer by going up against him.
Yeah.
Because he has insanely followers that go after women like E. Jean Carroll.
And circumventing the process, like this was trialed, a jury of peers found him guilty on the felony charges. But even with Eugene Carroll, there was a trial. It wasn't the people saying this. It wasn't a he, she. It was the courts had decided.
Yes, absolutely. Well, bold or silly?
Oh,
This is the silliest.
I think it's depressing.
Well, it is, when it comes to this person, it's so interesting, I think, to consider the factors that are beyond this one person. Because just seeing how different groups of people respond to a character like Donald Trump is so illuminating.
And you know what got me thinking? When I try to apply for a job, I'm like, oh, do I meet all the criteria? Should I apply? Am I good enough? I have not paid any hush money to any porn stars. So I think if you haven't, if our listeners haven't, put your hand up for any leadership position, because clearly the standards are
Low.
The
Standards are negative.
Yeah, so the standard is if you haven't paid hush money to anyone, just to anyone, you are eligible for a leadership position.
If you are an ethical human being, most of the time,
We'll take you.
your turn.
My turn. So staying in that Americas region, but just a little bit south of the border, let's take a look at Mexico, who've elected their first female president.
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah, and it was actually quite an interesting matchup because regardless, it would have been because it was a female businesswoman, Gloria, I believe her name was. So Claudia Sheinbaum, her background is actually quite impressive. She's a former energy scientist and also the former mayor of Mexico City.
Wow.
And she comes from quite an interesting background as well. She has Jewish maternal grandparents who fled Bulgaria during the Nazi era. Both her parents are actually scientists, and
Scientists represent.
I know, that's why I chose this story. I'm intrigued. She herself actually studied physics. She earned a doctorate, so she has a PhD in energy engineering. And she's actually spent many, many years in a very prestigious lab in California, researching Mexican energy consumption patterns. And so she's really an authority when it comes to that climate change space.
And much needed.
Much.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely, and I 100% agree. And so in 2018, she made history actually by becoming Mexico City's first female mayor. And so this was a position that she held until 2023. So she's someone that we should keep an eye on. I'm not sure where her policies lean. That's why this is where we have to just, it's very exciting that it's Mexico's first female president. It's very exciting that she's a female scientist. But I really think when it comes to leadership positions, we've got to see how the policies play out for the general.
That's right,
people.
the performance as well.
Yeah.
What an amazing story. And yeah, I was going to say that.
The bar
Yes.
is higher. So for a female, she has both a PhD in energy
That's
physics.
right.
She comes from a very prestigious lab, and then for Donald Trump.
Very good point.
Yeah.
And I think that we also, in general, just have a higher standard for women. I say this, with a bit of like cheekiness. I will defend a woman's right to
be ruthless,
to be back to do dodgy things, and not saying that I want this particular president to be dodgy, but I think that sometimes women deserves a break from not being perfect, from not being just in the other.
I understand what you're trying to say, Belle, and I agree. I think women, when they're in leadership positions, are expected to be maternal, look after the people, and not
maternal is the word that
it
makes me.
It's frustrating. And like, women come in all different shapes and sizes. We can be ruthless when necessary, and so this idea that female power has to look a certain way is actually quite limiting.
Yeah.
So I think you raise a very important point there.
And I think that she most likely is ruthless to become the president in a country.
Absolutely.
So go, Claudia. Don't let us down.
Yes, please don't let us down.
All right, closer to home. This is a really interesting one. The University of Melbourne published a book titled Dumpa Gugguwana, A History of Indigenous Australia, and the University of Melbourne, that examines the University of Melbourne's troubled and complex historical relationship with Indigenous people.
Oh, what an interesting conversation that's going to start.
And I think that it is a bold one.
Yeah.
Absolutely a bold one. So Dumpa Gugguwana means truth telling in the Woi Wurrung language of the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung people, on whose unceded lands the main University of Melbourne campuses are located, and also where we record this podcast. Fun fact. So I want to acknowledge that, give a recognition to the people who wrote the books: Professor Marcia Langton, Dr. Ross Jones, and Dr. James Waghorn. This is the first of a 2-volume series, and it's quite a thick book as well. So the book really takes an honest and hard look at the history. As I mentioned, the University of Melbourne is, recently the ranking just came out, the top 1 university in Australia. It is quite elite. It's been around for hundreds of years, and it certainly has some complicated and confronting history when it comes to the Indigenous people of Australia. So the book includes chapters on the university's colonial and eugenic history and complicity in scientific racism. More specifically, it's kind of examines how some of Australia's most celebrated scientists and researchers, along with doctors, historians, and anthropologists, some of them advocated to restrict the breeding, this is quote unquote, restrict the breeding of less able, which means mentally deficient Australians. And by that they mean the Aboriginal people. I can't find the words to really respond to this, but can I say that I do appreciate having this book and having this acknowledgement as part of the truth-telling process to really recognize, acknowledge the terrible things that have been done, and that is the first step to reconciliation.
Absolutely. And Belle, thank you for bringing this up. This is something that I hadn't heard of, and this is absolutely a book that I'm going to seek out, because even as you were saying it, I was like, scientists? Not us. We would never do something like that. And you recall, no, absolutely not. This really did happen. And part of, moving forward is to examine the flaws, the truth, and have a truthful process towards that reconciliation. So absolutely, what an important book. And I'm so glad that someone's written it up and they've done that process and talking to Indigenous Australians to bring the hidden stories to life. The shameful
it
past.
certainly is part of the history. And I know that speaking to people who work at the university, who have been involved in this project, and also with some of the First Nations people at the university, there are still a lot to be done to even start to make up the horrible things that had been carried out towards the Aboriginal people.
Yeah, things that were policy and the law.
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And all of us who live in and work in this area and who have some sort of interaction with this land should also play a part. We have a responsibility, and that's why we do the acknowledgement of country at the start of this podcast, and really remember that in all of our actions.
Yeah. The one thing I'd say to that is like, to love your country is to accept the flaws of your country to make sure that it never happens again. And I think I love Australia. I love being here. So it's very important. So this is, yeah, thank you for bringing this. So for my final bold or silly story, I've kind of gone for a bit of a heartwarming story.
Yes.
So I'm going to hit you. I know that you love movies just as much as I do, but I know you're a bit of a going to the cinema type of girl. We talked about this in our last podcast. She is a go to cinema.
Debate.
Yes.
Cinema.
And I am sitting at home in your trackies.
Netflix and chill.
Yeah, Netflix and chill type of girl. However, this movie might be the one that convinces me to go back to the cinema. It's called All We Imagine as Light, and it's a 2024 drama, and it's written and directed by Payal Kayapadia. And it's about two Malayali nurses. They live in Mumbai, and they're kind of in shitty relationships. And so they take a trip, and it's this really beautiful story about how these nurses explore their own desires and dreams. And what's really exciting about this is that it actually received an 8-minute standing ovation at the end of the 2024 Cannes Film Festival, and it actually won the Grand Prix prize. And so it's the first ever Indian film to have won this. And what's really exciting is that it's from South India. It's not it's not glamorous. It's not a rom-com. It's nothing like that. It's really about these two women who are exploring their own desires and doing it in a way that feels authentic. So I'm very, very excited. I'm so looking forward to going to the cinema to watch this one.
How beautiful. I'm looking forward to seeing this film as well, and thanks for introducing this to me. I always love to, go out of our comfort zone with the Hollywood blockbusters to really look at the cinema in other countries, and seeing a South Asian film being platformed at the Cannes Film Festival, the most prestigious film festival, is so incredible just for representation. I can see how much it means to you, and love it.
Yay!
Oh.
So maybe a movie night? Is that
movie night for our next episode?
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, let's wrap things up by calling BS on things that have a culture in a stranglehold. Calling BS or stand by it.
All right, audience, let's get our paddles out. The first one I'm going to bring.
So excited about the first one.
The first one I'm going to bring to the table is something that is so near and dear to my heart. All right, it is Jenny from the block and Mr. Affleck from the Dunkin' Donuts commercials. Currently, they're hitting Splitsville. Look, in 2021, when Ben was in Jennifer's video, I was like, this is the love of my life. This is all my dreams and hopes as a young person.
Jenny from the block.
Jenny from the block, she had it.
What a classic. That video was so hot.
It was amazing. And then 20 years later, when they got back together, I was like, my life is complete. This is the end. I love it. This is it. Fairy tale. But the fact that they're hitting Splitsville, it really brings the question, should you ever rekindle a romance from a long lost love? Do we stand by it, or do we call BS on rekindling romances? Oh, we got a couple of depends. Stand by it.
I will stand by it. Well, I think firstly, Hollywood relationships are probably not the best examples to
not break my
relate
heart, Belle.
to our lives. But Ben and Jen, I will
Speak for
stand by. I will stand by anything that Jennifer Lopez wants to do with her life, including self-fund a
Her movies?
film,
Yep.
documentary, and album about their love stories. Even though halfway through, actually at the start of the tour, they are hitting this field. So, Jen loves love.
Jen
Jen
tell
loves
me.
love, but Ben, I had a massive crush on Ben Affleck. Not at the time when he was filming it, but hey, don't judge me. I have flaws. I'm not flawless. Massive crush in Good Will Hunting. I know Matt Damon is the main star, but I don't know, Ben Affleck is the bad boy that got my heart and got J-Lo's heart as well.
Yeah.
So I'm sad that they are splitting, but I'm happy for the story,
For the story, absolutely.
for the plot.
For the plot. No, I call BS. Never rekindle. Dead and gone.
You don't love love.
I love
Like
love,
you would ask.
but there's new love.
Okay, plenty of fish in the sea. All right, my turn. This one is I don't know how to characterize this, so I'm just gonna say Rafael Nadal. Oh, he's such a sweetheart. So the Roland Garros is on. It is the French Open, and this weekend is the finals. So unfortunately, the king of play, Rafael Nadal, was knocked out in first round by Alexander Zverev, which I'm not a fan of, which I will elaborate next time, but he's had charges against him about violence against women. But he did made it to the final. So Alex Zverev is in the final with Carlos Alcaraz, which is another Spaniard. Is that the word? Spaniard, I believe. Same as Rafael Nadal, and Carlos has been said to be the new Rafa. So maybe it's a handing of the torch, but I'm sad that Rafa most people say that this is probably his last time playing on the court, given that he's 38. I think he's similar age to, what's the Swiss name?
Federer?
Federer.
Okay.
But Federer has retired long before Nadal. But Nadal had a great, I think, fairy tale ending at
This
the Australian Open. Not this year, last year.
Okay. I know nothing about tennis, so thank you for bringing this story. I do remember the Oz Open story. I'm just excited for when all the sports stars come into commercials. That's when I remember them.
They have the most creative commercials. Please go and watch an ad that Federer and Nadal did for Louis Vuitton. It was so sweet and lovely.
All right.
So yeah, that's the teaser. Go and watch it.
I will watch that. Speaking of sports, my next one.
Okay, this one is less.
It's sports related, Belle. It's sports related. This is Harrison Butker, who, if you don't know, don't worry, not a big deal. But he is a chief. He's on the Chiefs, so I think he's a quarterback, if I recall.
He's not the quarterback.
He's not the quarterback.
The quarterback Chiefs is.
Oh, is
Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, okay. I was going to say Travis. Clearly, I was not lying when I said I know.
No,
nothing about sports.
Travis' position is funny. It's called the tight end.
The time. Oh, so many songs make sense now. I'm gonna listen back to Taylor's album. But Harrison, whoever this guy is, plays a sport. He's a big beefy guy. Decided to open his mouth at a commencement address at a Catholic college, and he specifically looked at the women and went, "Hey, you have all your life you have been counted with the most diabolical lies. More than professional achievements, you should be excited by the vocation of being a homemaker." At a commencement graduation speech.
I don't even have words. Like,
What?
I cannot find a bone in my body to
Yeah.
care about this. Like, okay, but tell me what you.
Okay, for me,
why
I
you
stand
think
by it. And hear me out. Like, red flags are really hard to find, right? The fact that this man got on stage and said this, I love it. It's a red flag. I stand by it. I want the red flags in like flashlights, in spotlights. So when he turns around and says, "Women, you've been diabolically lied to," I know stay away. So
That is such a good point.
have
There
I
are
switched your mind?
There are many hidden misogynists out there, so I appreciate one that just have misogynist written on his
bold.
forehead.
Yeah,
So,
bold claiming it.
okay, still calling BS on whatever that comes out of his mouth.
Yes.
But I agree with you. Next on the list, okay, this is an interesting one, and I feel we've established that I am so out of fashion. And this made me feel I'm out of fashion again. Apparently, there's a type of influencers that are getting popular by the day on social media.
Are you talking about us, Belle?
Well, that's true. But these particular ones are the young women who have corporate jobs. So sad for me because I just quit corporate. Well, both of us just quit corporate not long ago. So we actually missed the cycle. But how interesting that apparently more of them are showing their lives working a 9-to-5 job and their 5 to 9 influencer job. And people find it interesting to see women just dressing up in corporate clothing, go into work and actually work a normal 9-to-5 jobs.
The way you've explained it, I stand by it. I before was a bit like, oh, who's glorifying a corporate job? But the idea that it's, this is what you do, this is how you work, and showing yourself as a professional. Yeah, you've convinced me, Belle.
Awesome. I'm happy about that, especially after our track wife conversation, which I defend women's rights to do anything that they like, but I like to see my life reflected on the screen and them making it look more interesting gives me inspiration that actually my job isn't that bad.
You know what? Speaking of my life being reflected, Bridgerton is my life reflected.
In one way.
In absolutely every single way.
Do you have hot juice in your life? Please introduce yourself to me.
I have them in my head. That counts. I think Bridgerton, Colin and Penelope Featherington.
Penelope can do so much better.
You did not say that. Oh my goodness. I'm cancelling you, Belle. No. Pollen. Hear me out, alright? Pollen.
Okay, that's their couple name.
Yes, that's their
Pollen.
Pollen is their couple
I
name.
feel
I'm wearing bees.
I'm allergic to that.
Here is a non-toxic man. Yes, she fell hard. This is a woman. She knows what she wants. She's out there. She knows how to make her money. She just loves this man for who he is. This man was oblivious. And look, many of us know oblivious people, all right? They don't see the signs, they don't see the flirting, and they're so oblivious. But when he fell so hard for her in that carriage seat.
That carriage scene, oh my god,
knees.
makes me blush. That needs to be a category of Pornhub. Can we say that in our podcast?
I did not think you were going to go there, Belle. I did not. So yes, absolutely. I have watched that. I think
I
it's
love Bridgerton.
me too. Anthony will always have my heart, but look, Pollen is a close number 2. I'm loving it.
I love the women in Bridgerton. They are, even though I just love this show so much. Shonda Rhimes?
Yeah.
Shonda Rhimes?
Yeah,
Incredible.
Yes.
Incredible.
The diverse perspectives. I think I really like Violet Bridgerton. Here's an older woman who's kind of gone through menopause and talking about, hey, I'm kind of, feeling a bit sexy right now. And like the fact that, so I think when I first saw this scene, I really wanted to be all about Penelope and Colin. And then I was really frustrated with the other pieces, but I do like it setting up to show that women can feel desire at any age. So yeah, I agree. The fact that womanhood isn't just puberty and then you get married and then we just cease to exist, but rather, hey, post menopause, you still are attractive. You still can get it if you want it.
I'm looking forward to that storyline. I love that it's a period drama, but also it's also subversive in that way, as you said, and it's escapism in the best way, best form possible.
It's my life.
Okay, it is your life, but we both.
Delulu.
Okay, my next one is speaking of Delulu. My next one is about, how mental health talk is becoming more and more prevalent and prominent on social media, and we do see a lot of younger people self-diagnosing mental health conditions. Yeah, well, it's a bigger topic for us to unpack in a future episode, but what do we think?
I was
It's a complicated one.
Yeah, I was so, at the start, I really liked the awareness, but then after a while, I started watching so many TikToks that I was convinced that I have bipolar disorder, that I have autism, and I was like, and once you start watching it, the algorithm then continually feeds you that. And I was like, at what point going, oh God, I have all this, oh my gosh. And I didn't know what to do with the information because there were definitely experiences that I related to, but then I didn't know how to turn that into something, and it didn't tell me what to do with it. So I just ended up self-diagnosing and self-identifying, but having no avenue to do anything.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I agree with the fact that having better awareness is important. We all know that in our parents' generation, mental health is something that is so taboo, and there are a lot of issues that are hidden inside. So the awareness is good, but yeah, the self-diagnosing is, I think, a bit of a concern because mental health is a complex thing, and it really takes going to professionals probably multiple times to be able to really identify where you're at and what you need as well. It's not just the diagnosing part, but also how does that fit into your life and what can you do.
Yeah. Can I add, I think there's also a lived person experience that's really important as well. Like, I think sometimes medical professionals can be a bit patronizing when it comes to how does it feel living with multiple sclerosis and things like that. So when it comes to mental health, which is a bit of an invisible disease, I think these stories are important, but then what the algorithm I feel like is doing is it's awareness, but it's talking about quite vague experiences that when they do bring it back, you're like, oh, of course everyone has bipolar disease. I too, struggle to get out of bed. Like, it doesn't give that severity, and it doesn't, and I do not have the tools to diagnose it. Yeah.
It flattens a lot of these conversations, and thanks for bringing up the lived experience. The other thing as well is being culturally responsive. So the practices should also take into account the cultural backgrounds, etc. And I want to give a shout out to Shapes and Sound, who is a friend of this podcast, and they do really amazing things for Asian mental health. So check them out.
Stand by it.
We stand by them.
I think this one is a bit of it's a quick one. King Charles portrait. Do we love it? Do we hate it? Why is it red? Why is there a butterfly? Put a butterfly in my head just to represent, but I'm not sure how I feel about it. It looks great, but why?
Does it look great? Like, look into yourself in the mirror and be honest.
To me, it was like, yeah, I guess the British Empire did screw up a few countries, and I guess the red represent, and I was like, is it what it's meant to represent?
Speaking of truth telling, I suppose, okay, I can get behind that. Actually, the first time when I saw it, I was so confused, but as you say, the more that I looked at it, there's an artistic expression there that I do appreciate, and the red as well. I don't know, it's like the first thing that it made me think of is, do you know about the phone hacking scandal that hit Prince Charles at the time, like decades ago?
No.
Okay, just very briefly, during that period of time, there are so many celebrities phones that were hacked. It was a whole thing in Britain, and with Prince Charles at the time, I believe that he was still married to Princess Diana, and they picked up what he said to Camilla at the time, and the exact words that he said was, "I want to be your temple."
Yeah! Oh my god, I remember that. I just didn't know it came from a wiretapping scandal. Oh, that gives a whole new perspective to this red painting. So,
that explains so much, and his dream has come true. On this king's birthday.
How very fitting. Guess we stand by it.
All right.
I think that
the next one that I'm bringing to you is one that I haven't really made up my mind yet, so it's good to discuss with,
Okay.
get your opinion and our audience opinion. Victoria's Secret fashion show is coming back this year. So they have stopped for a few years. I think the last one was probably 2019, and the viewership has dropped significantly, so it was not worth them putting another one on. They stopped for a few years and they tried to reinvent themselves. And apparently it's back this year. What do you feel? How do you feel?
I remember when I was young, it was always these beautiful, tall, like gazelle-looking women. They were always white and blonde hair. The person that came out always had that,
So
diamond,
thin.
diamond encrusted bra, and yeah, I just looked at them and went, I could never. I just like it. Couldn't relate. And so I really like what Fenty's done with their lingerie
Yes.
shows, where you have like body shapes and sizes. It's positive, it's sexy, and it sometimes when it comes to body positivity, they just put the same clothes on a person that's from a different body shape and kind of go, off you go, and it doesn't look right. Whereas Fenty really, it was empowering, it was sexy, it was meant for the curves, and I like that. So it depends on what it's going to look like. In saying that, I do love the music that comes along with it, and the artist.
Performance.
Yeah. And there's always like a scandal, like one of the singers is probably dating a big model, and like there's
Adam Levine, The Weeknd.
yeah, there's always, and like Rihanna showing them off, like
Yes.
So-
Rihanna.
I don't
Queen.
know. So I'm a bit, depends on how it goes.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I do enjoy watching it. As you say, brands like Victoria's Secret has made quite negative impacts on beauty standards, especially on young women, that we know has caused a lot of issues with body image and eating disorders. But I feel like at this age, I can watch them and just enjoy the production, enjoy it as a show without relating it to my personal identity. I think that is my personal perspective, but agree with you that with this large platform, it's about also thinking about who is benefiting from this, and are their hearts really in it when it comes to the body positivity movement. So I guess we'll watch and see.
Watch and see. I like that. So my very, very final one is, for this episode at least, is the Try Guys. And this is probably dating me because you have no idea who the Try Guys are.
No idea.
Clearly you are not a nerd, as mentioned in the previous segment. You did not stay at home and watch YouTube videos. So Try Guys was a offshoot of the BuzzFeed production team. So this was when BuzzFeed was popping. Try Guys were these 4 guys, one who shall remain nameless because
He did unspeakable things.
he did unspeakable things, such as he was known as Wife Guy, and then he cheated on his wife, so we shall not mention him. And then
Been cancelled.
Yes. Then it's Keith, Eugene, and Ned. Well, not Ned. Ned's the one that's been Zach. Gosh, names. So those were the 4 original. They started in BuzzFeed, then they started their own company, and it would just be 4 guys trying different things out. And it was very exciting, it was informative, but Eugene was the Asian representative. But he was like the sex symbol. He was cool, he was talented. So they would do this thing where they would try things out for the very first time. And Eugene has always consistently, like it would be the first time sewing, would make a dress. Incredible.
Wow. Can I just say Asians always? High achievers.
High achievers.
What can we say?
And he was one of the very first people that I had seen in my YouTube journey, like who had come out. And so he really talked about coming out and how that Asian experience affected him. And I think a lot of people, like when we saw him and he spoke of some of the challenges of being part of the community.
Yeah, coming out as in coming out as gay.
As gay, yeah. It was just like, it was so powerful. He was very beautiful and poetic. But the reason I'm bringing this right now.
I'm now a fan.
Absolute fan, but he's actually stepping away from fame. And I think that's an interesting perspective. So, they spent all this time, they created their own company, they spent all this time doing production. But for him to actually turn around and go, look, I'm really, I'm good at this stuff. People enjoy me telling my stories and things like that. But what I'm really passionate about is creating in terms of script form and filmmaking, he actually stepped away from this very public profile to pursue his own artistic interests. So to me, it's kind of, how do we feel when a famous person who, you know, I think when you have this parasocial relationship with someone on YouTube, you kind of expect them to give their whole entire life. How do we feel when they kind of go, you know what, thank you very much, this isn't for me?
I think that's a king move to know what is right for him and to stick by it. Yeah. Stand by it.
Excellent.
All right, the final one for this episode is a quick one. ChatGPT 4.0. Yay! I love ChatGPT 4.0. Okay, ChatGPT 3 is rudimentary. I cannot use it for a lot of things because when it generates a paragraph of text, it's very clearly AI and it's not very versatile. It's just not as useful. But ChatGPT 4.0, my gosh, they are taking over the world. And for now, I'm happy for them to take over the boring part of my job. So thank you, OpenAI engineers.
Yes, and if they could start doing my laundry and dishwashing, appreciate it. Don't do
Please
the art.
and thank you.
Yeah, don't do the art. Leave that to us. The podcasting, leave that to us. But
Don't use our voice.
Yeah.
Well, we
We're
are watching.
Yeah.
Don't do us dirty like you do Scarlett Johansson.
ScarJo. Yeah, absolutely. So stand by it. Please work on fixing laundry and dishwashing. Thank you.
And with that, Shaz and our audience, we've come to the end of today's episode of Calling BS Through Our Eyes.
A big thank you to all our listeners for tagging along on this wild ride. And
Well, indeed, in
Yeah.
this episode.
And so if you've enjoyed the episode, please hit subscribe, drop us a review, and help spread the word.
Until next time, remember,
Don't just accept the BS.
call it out. Can we do the Matrix?
Thank you. Also,
That was super long.
that was long, right? Sorry.
That was an hour and a half.
Oh my god, was it supposed to be?
40 minutes. Sorry, we really enjoyed
Time.
the stand-up.
Juicy.
Yeah.